wonderful to be here with all of you, and fun to get to show these slides. So this trip to the Holy Land I was supposed to take 2 years ago, right as COVID arrived on the scene, and I was nervous about going to Israel and coming back and bringing COVID with me. So I canceled the trip. I was glad I did. The trip did go, but they got to see only about half of the sites because of COVID, and they ended up being quarantined. So I feel like I made a good decision. So I was very glad to be able to make this trip. And our group was one of the first pilgrim groups to go since COVID. So for all the pilgrim groups that come, and of course you can imagine this is really their livelihood, are all the pilgrims that come to the Holy Land. So we were very fortunate. There were places where the guide told us we would normally wait 2 or 3 hours to get in because of the crowds, and we walked right in. So we got to see a lot, and the timing ended up being really good. So let's get started. Obviously, I went in February. On the left is our tour group. Again, I felt fortunate. It was a lovely group of people. The trip came out of the Episcopal Church in Scottsdale, Arizona, but it ended up that they invited a number of friends and family to go, and so it was really a mixed group. I wasn't just the lone soul who wasn't part of that group. There were people from all over the country, and even one family from England. So it ended up being a really nice group. There were about 20 of us. That is the view looking from Gethsemane, from the Garden of Gethsemane into the old city of Jerusalem. And on the right is our guide, Jeanne, who was wonderful, and I'm hoping if I'm able to lead a trip here from St. Paul's that we will be able to get Jeanne great. I would say overall, it was almost more than I could absorb. It's something that I'm continuing to try to understand all that I experienced, and I think as we go throughout the year and I listen to homilies and I write homilies, that I will be absorbing it more fully. But I will say that one of the things that really struck me while I was there, which seems strange for a priest to say, given that this is what I do for a living and I preach all the time from the gospel, but when you're there, it feels even more real. That's about the best way I can explain it. In particular, the sense of Mary's youth, how young Mary was when this thing happened to her, and also just the ordinariness of the disciples who were called into this ministry with Jesus. There was just something that overwhelmed me about that. So here we go. This is just a little bit to give you a little bit of an idea of what the area is in case you're not familiar. So we flew into Tel Aviv, which you might be able to see the red circle on the left, right along the water. That's where we flew in. I am doing my presentation in the order of Jesus' life. That's not exactly how we did it because it wasn't practical, but if you go north, almost to the top of the screen, the Sea of Galilee, that's where 80% of Jesus' ministry was, in the Sea of Galilee. And then you can see the thick line coming down from the Sea of Galilee along the east side of the West Bank. That's the Jordan River. You see the West Bank over on the left. The other yellow strip is the Gaza Strip. Bethlehem, you can see right below the 2 red blocks. Bethlehem is in the West Bank, as is the old city of Jerusalem, but the old city of Jerusalem has been annexed by Israel. So as you can imagine, we were in and out of the West Bank quite a bit, going through checkpoints and getting to experience that. All right, so let's begin at the beginning, the Annunciation. This is the Church of the Annunciation. As you can imagine, throughout the Holy Land, there are churches that have been built on top of churches, on top of the original sites. So this is obviously a modern church that was built on the site of the Annunciation. In the center, you can see that mural. There are, it's a mosaic or a painting, it might be mosaic. There, on the outside of this church, all around the courtyard, there are 43 mosaics of the Annunciation, and inside there are 16 from around the world. So groups from, there's such a wonderful sense of the global world that we live in, that they've all these countries had contributed mosaics and paintings. And on the right, this was a massive sanctuary, but on the right, what I wanted you to be able to see, there's the altar, but you're looking down. Do you see how this is like a center open area? You're looking down to the level below, and you see that over and over again in Israel, because of the historic sites are down below the modern building. So we're going to go down there. And this is Mary's home. So this is what we were looking at, looking down. This is where Mary lived when the Annunciation, when the angel Gabriel spoke to her. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and he came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus." It's very powerful to be standing there in this place where Mary talked to the angel Gabriel. So then next is the visitation, where Mary visited Elizabeth, and the baby John jumped in Elizabeth's womb. In those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leapt in her womb. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." So you can see on the left, there was just a beautiful painting above the entryway of the church of the visitation. And I didn't want necessarily to see a photo of me, but I wanted you to see, we actually had to climb up quite a ways to this church, and so it was looking down over a beautiful valley. It was just gorgeous. And I loved that sculpture of Mary and Elizabeth. But what is really neat also, similar to the Annunciation, all along, do you see the plaques on the wall on the right painting? All of those are the Magnificat in different languages, right? So again, from around the world, Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name." So there it is, all over the courtyard, right outside, right across from this church. So I wanted you to see, these are the shepherds' fields. So the shepherds who were visited by the angel Gabriel lived in caves. And so we were able to go into one of these caves. I just thought it was interesting to see. You can see the roof of the cave is black. That's from the fires right within the cave that they use for warmth and for eating. But it was just as powerful to be there in this place where these shepherds who went out to the field were living at the time. And also you can just see, you'll see this over and over again in my slides, just about in all of these places we stopped and said prayers. And so there's always an altar and a chance to stop and pray. All right, the Church of the Nativity. So here we are, where Jesus was born. This was an example of a place that the guide told us normally we'd have to wait 3 hours to get in, and we were able to walk right in. The first century church built on this site was built by St. Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine. It was destroyed by the Samaritans. It was rebuilt by Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, and this is the church that is still standing in the 6th century. And interesting, I thought it was interesting, if you look in the very center, do you see that low doorway? That's the doorway we go into. It's only 4 feet high. They did that because this church was built in the 6th century. People were just plowing into the church on horseback. And so they closed the entrance, so it's only 4 feet, so you have to walk in. And then on the right, that's what you walk into. That's the nave right now. It is a Greek Orthodox church at the moment. In the back, you can see the gold altar. That was originally wood. It's been covered in gold. There's also beautiful mosaics up high above. You can see on the left. They're also on the right side. They're gorgeous mosaics, and they are currently being restored by the Palestinian Authority. And here we are. Here is the site of Jesus' birth. You can take turns. Again, we were lucky because no crowds. You can take turns going right up. There I am on the right, going right up to the spot and saying a prayer. What is left of the manger is in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, but this is the site. All right, so after one of the first things we know about Jesus' ministry is going to the Jordan River. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, and it's hard to see. You can see the two flags. So the Israeli flag on this side that we were on, and you can see sort of in the center, the red and green, the flag of Jordan is on the other side of the river. So I'm in the Jordan River with the assistant rector of the church that sponsored the trip, and he and I are saying the prayers. And I don't know how you thought the Jordan River might look. Gary, you thought that was exactly what it would look like? Is that what you said to me when I showed you?
Muddy.
Muddy, yeah. It's very muddy, reeds. So that was fun. There we are praying, and people took turns getting into the river. Then Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized by him. When Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." And then right after Jesus is baptized, of course, he goes out into the wilderness. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and was tempted by the devil 3 times. One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. Worship the Lord your God and serve only him. So this was the area where he was during those 40 days. And you can sort of see, it's sort of hard to see because it blends so well into the mountain, but on the lower left-hand corner, you can see there's actually a monastery built into the mountain. All right, Pilgrim House. So I wanted you to see this was the first place that we stayed up by the Sea of Galilee. We were there for 3 or 4 days, I think, and it was just a beautiful retreat spot. There's the sun rising over the Sea of Galilee. It looked out over it. It was just beautiful. And I also threw in a slide on agriculture. These are the things when you're on the bus going from one spot to another, going around from the top left. There's almonds, bananas, figs, grapefruit, lemons, mangoes, olives, and oranges. The people from California weren't as excited about the lemon tree as I was. All right, and here we are at the Sea of Galilee. You can see in the middle how green it is. It's just absolutely beautiful. On the left, the person the very farthest left, that's Wayne, who's the assistant rector from the church that sponsored the trip. Kadi, next, was one of their lay leaders, Hassan the guide. And then my claim to fame here, Ridian Brooke, was on the trip. He's a British author. He's well known for a show that's on the BBC every morning called Thought for the Day, and he often gives the reflection. But he also wrote The Aftermath, which was a movie some of you may have seen. It came out in 2018 with Keira Knightley. So it was fun as I was talking to him to learn that he was the guy that wrote the book. But anyway, he was on the trip also, and he was entertaining us. So there we are out on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. And there's a little museum there, and there is a boat that was discovered in 1986, but it is 2,000 years old. All right, now, the wedding at Cana in Galilee. Again, there's 2 levels. There's the church, the nave, when you come in, and then down below, that lowest level, those are remains from the first century. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Now standing there were six stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, he said to the bridegroom, "You have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So next we have Jacob's well. This is when Jesus stops by Jacob's well to rest, and a Samaritan woman comes to draw water, and they engage in a conversation about living water, and the conversation ends with the woman saying that she knows the Messiah is coming, and Jesus says to her, "I am he." So this is the well. It's a Greek Orthodox church right now. In the center, in the very center, you can see our guide, Jeanne, and sort of right behind him, the man in black, that is the priest of that church. There are icons all over the nave that this gentleman painted, all of them, which was quite something. And then you go downstairs, and there is the well. And we did, I think that she was on our trip. I think she was the one who pulled the water up out of the well. Okay, next we headed to, or next in his footsteps is the city of Capernaum. So you can see the remains, the ruins on the left. In the center, do you see how there's sort of a circle? There's a wall that's a circle. That's Peter's home. That is where Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. And right on top, it's a strange picture because actually right over the top, the church has been built on top of it. It's outside, you're outside, but the church has been built over it, so that's why it's hard to get a sense of it. The other thing I thought was interesting here on the right, do you see the homeless Jesus on the bench? And some of you may have read the article that an artist put one of these on a bench in Bay Village, near the Episcopal Church there, and the rector of the Episcopal Church got a lot of calls about how there was a homeless man lying on a bench. And it was actually the same sculpture that we see here. So Peter, after leaving the synagogue, he entered Simon's house. Jesus entered Simon's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked him about her. Then he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. Immediately she got up and began to serve them. So Capernaum is interesting. It's a large area that you can walk around, but most of it is mostly what you're looking at are the ruins. All right. And then the Mount of the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." It's a really pretty spot. You can sort of see on the right, do you see the blue looking through? You're looking out on the back side of this church. You're looking out over the valley. Very pretty. And this is Pater Noster. This is where Jesus taught the disciples how to pray. Pray in this way: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. And again, on the walls, in the middle, I showed you a little section of it, but again, the Lord's Prayer is in 140 different languages on those ceramic plaques around the courtyard. And we had a really interesting experience. Of course, we went down below, and on the right is the spot where Jesus was teaching. And we listened to a recording of the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, which was Jesus' language. And that was really, really powerful to listen to it in Aramaic. I'm sure you could find it online if you wanted to listen to it sometime. And now we have the Loaves and Fishes. This is the Church of the Multiplication. It's the site of Jesus turning 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish into enough for 5,000. There's a mosaic right in front of, on the left, there's a mosaic right in front of the altar. And actually you see a rock. There's a rock under the altar. And then where I'm assuming that's where Jesus stood when this happened. But then the mosaic in front of the altar, it only has 4 loaves of bread, and the artist wanted to demonstrate that Jesus himself is the bread of life. So there were 4 loaves of bread instead of 5. They had a beautiful altar outside. You can see right by the Sea of Galilee. It was really just so beautiful. It was the only church that would allow me to preside as a woman. So I did preside that day. It was a wonderful experience. I ran into another woman who is a priest. You didn't see many. And I had my collar on because we were at church at St. George's, and she did not. And she introduced herself to me, and she said she was told not to wear a collar as a woman. So I didn't wear one after that. I was a little nervous, but anyway, I said I'm hoping to take a trip from St. Paul's, but I will have to have a male clergy with me in order to be able to lead worship.
In the whole of Israel, that's the only place?
All the places that we were, that was the only place that would allow me. Yeah, it was a little disappointing, but it is what it is, and I was grateful for the opportunity. It was a beautiful sight. All right, on to Bethany. All right, many churches have been built over the centuries on the site of Lazarus' tomb. The current church is St. Lazarus. The architect is Antonio Baruzzi. He's known as the architect of the Holy Land because he also designed churches at the Mount of Transfiguration, Mount of Beatitudes, and the Garden of Gethsemane. So on the left, you can see Jesus is at the house of Mary and Martha. And actually, on the very left, Martha's at the well. And then in the center of the painting, she's come and she's there. Martha and Mary are together with Jesus, and Martha's complaining about Mary. On the right, do you see Lazarus on the right side of the painting? He's coming out of the tomb. When Jesus arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Jesus talks to Mary and Martha about resurrection and eternal life. He weeps over their grief. He thanks God aloud so that the crowd gathered will know God. And then he cries with a loud voice for Lazarus to come out of the tomb. And he does. This is the Church of the Transfiguration. Again, I just took a photo so you can see that you're looking out over the valley, which is beautiful. And on the rock on this side is where Jesus stood. It's covered now, obviously, by glass. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." These are some of the paintings that are inside of that church. On the left, that beautiful stained glass peacocks are a symbol of eternity. So you can see the stained glass. In the center is Moses and Elijah are on either side of Jesus, and then Peter, James, and John are just below. And then there was another painting in there. Let me read this passage. This is from 1 Kings, actually. Elijah confronting I just reinterpreted. So this is where Elijah was confronting the prophets of Baal, okay? And Elijah tells the prophets of Baal to prepare a bull for sacrifice, but with no fire. And so they do that, and they call on their god, Baal, and nothing happens. And then Elijah prepares a bull for sacrifice with no fire, and he even pours water on it to make his point, and then he calls on God, and the bull goes up in flames. So that is what the painting is on the right. Okay, so from here, from the Transfiguration, Jesus now sets his eyes on Jerusalem. He never returned to Galilee after this. He knows what's needed to be done. The guide pointed out, this was the guide's offering, that Jesus knew this area really well, right? Like he grew up here, he knows the area. It would have been easy for him to escape. He could have, and he could have used more time to explain to the disciples all that was going on, but he didn't. He headed to Jerusalem and he let the events play out as they did. So Bethphage is the starting point of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And every year a palm procession begins here and goes down into Jerusalem. They usually do it from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Our guide usually does that every year. And this is the Church of Bethphage on the left. In Hebrew, it means house of unripe figs. So you might recall that in this area, Jesus causes a fig tree with no fruit to wither. So this is the Church of Bethphage. When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this, the Lord needs them." So can you see he's on the donkey, right? You can see the palms on the left there. The disciples obviously went and did as Jesus directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt. They put their cloaks on them and he sat on them, on the cloaks on the donkey. The crowd came, they had branches, and the crowd went ahead shouting, "Hosanna. Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest heaven." And this is really hard to see, but just the painter's, what he's doing here. Jesus' hand right there, he's got 3 fingers up. So the 3 fingers, the painter is indicating the 3 fingers are the Trinity, and his 2 fingers down are his 2 natures, divine and human. All right. Let me check the time here. Okay. All right. This is the last hotel that we stayed at, the Gloria Hotel. It's actually inside the old city of Jerusalem, and you can walk around the ramparts above the city. And I'm up on the photo on the right, looking down into the old city. I'm up on one of the ramparts when I took that photo. There are, that gate there is the Jaffa gate. There's 8 gates into the old city of Jerusalem. One of them is sealed, but our hotel was right next to the Jaffa gate. All right, now we are walking down to the Garden of Gethsemane. And so this is a view in the center. You can see a view of the old city of Jerusalem. On the left, that tree is Spina Christi. It's the type of tree used to make the crown of thorns. So, can you see those? Those are, they're long and sharp. That's the tree that type of tree is the tree they would have used to make the crown of thorns. The photo on the right I just took because that mosque was so beautiful. All right, here we are in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is grieving his fate. He asks Peter, James, and John 3 times to stay awake with him while he prays, but they keep falling asleep. Judas arrives with the chief priests and elders and arrests him. We were given time here. They let us in. They actually, in this part of the garden, it's not just open to tours. You have to get permission to go in, so one group can be in there at a time. And our group gave us permission just to sit and meditate, and I did get lost in meditation and they had to come and disturb me, but it's very peaceful there. And the tree on the right, the olive tree is a symbol of eternal life because of its great durability. That tree on the right is 2,000 years old. And here is the church that's right next to the Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of All Nations. On the left, the rock that's right in front of the altar is where Jesus prayed before he was arrested. And then that's just the outside of the church and the mosaics inside the church. All right, this is the church of St. Peter in Galilee. This is where Peter denied Jesus twice before the cock crowed 3 times. So in the courtyard, that center courtyard sculpture is Peter and the servant girl and the guard. That's part of that scripture passage. I took a photo of the dome because it was just gorgeous. It was beautiful. Jesus was detained. This is where the spot where Jesus was detained the night of his arrest from the garden. And so he's been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. They took him here. They detained him overnight. And that's the cell on the right where he was detained. And the picture on the left is looking up into the ceiling because that's how he would have been lowered into the cell, through that hole down into the cell. This is the church of Ecce Homo. This is where Jesus was beaten, bound, and crowned with thorns and presented to the crowd. So the nave is on the left. We had a church service in there. And then you go down below. The center and the right are down below. And the picture on the right then is the first station of the cross. So it's right below the spot where this happened. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that floor, that is the first century floor. And then from there, we followed the Stations of the Cross. So the Via del Rosso is the Stations of the Cross. It's the path that Jesus took to Golgotha. And obviously it looks different today, but you can see, I took a picture going up those stairs. You can see that he was dragging that cross up on that path. So we did each station, we stopped at each one and said a prayer. All right, and now we are at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this is where Jesus was crucified and buried. It's hard to explain how big this building is because all of that is contained in this building. The first time I went there, I was trying so hard to keep track of everything, and I couldn't even figure out everything that was going on inside this building. We actually went back the next day, a small group of us, because we learned of a practice, a tradition where you can have tapers lit inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Bring them back to your church and use them as lighters for candles on the altar. So I did that, and I did get them over here. So now we have those tapers that were lit there that can be used to light our candles here. So when Jesus was crucified, Gethsemane was outside of the old city. Let me find my notes here so I can put this right. Yes, so Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, was outside the walls of Jerusalem, not far out. It was a well-traveled path. And I always thought of it as like way out, where there was nothing like in the country, but that isn't what it was closer in, and it was a well-traveled path. But when the walls of the old city were extended, Golgotha became part of the old city. So on the left, I tried to take a photo so you could see, we actually walked up. Stairs are right here. Stairs are right there. So we actually walked up the stairs to what was Golgotha. And there's the spot where Jesus was crucified. So in the center, it is ornate. You can see how ornate it is. But the rocks on the left and the right were where the bandits were crucified. And then the spot in the center is covered like this. So again, we were lucky with the crowds. You can actually go up and kneel down and put your hand in and touch the stone on the place where he was crucified. Very holy. And then on the left is the slab where he was laid when he came down off the cross and prepared for burial. And then in the center, that building is where he was buried. Again, it's a church inside a church, essentially, over the spot where he was buried. And on the right is the actual place, the slab, the rock where he was buried. So all of this is inside the building. It's just hard to get your head around it. This is another photo, some more photos from Holy Sepulchre. This is going down. So you can see on the right, you can see how you're looking up again. Again, I'm trying to show you all the different layers. This is going down, and this is where this cave below Holy Sepulchre is where St. Helena, Constantine's mother, found the 3 crosses. So that helped identify the spot. So those are down there, and there's an altar down there. And then you can, again, as I said, you get that sense of layer on layer. Here we are on the road to Emmaus. 2 disciples were on their way to Emmaus. Jesus came near them, but they did not recognize him. They urged Jesus to come and stay with them. And while they were sitting around the table, Jesus took some bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then, just as they recognized him, he vanished from their sight. They returned to Jerusalem to share the good news of the resurrection. So this is the church where this happened, and the beautiful mosaics. They're not in great shape, but you can sort of see them on the right. They're beautiful. We did have a church service in there too. All right. Church of the Primacy. This is where Jesus ate breakfast with the disciples after the crucifixion. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to them, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." So it's a beautiful church. It's right there by the water. There, you can see the big rock in the center where they would have sat. And a wonderful sculpture on the right that says, "Feed my sheep." And here's the Chapel of the Ascension. This is where Jesus ascended to heaven. And that is a 1st century footprint. I don't know if it's the one, but it was a 1st century footprint. So I wanted, there's so much to talk about on a trip like this to Israel and Palestine. And it's heartbreaking. This land is holy to all 3 religions, which has just led to suspicion and violence instead of love. And it's really heartbreaking being there and witnessing that. So the Temple Mount is a really good historical example. It's located on a hill in the old city of Jerusalem. It is most sacred ground to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. So for Jews, this is the site of the 1st and 2nd temples. The first one built by King Solomon, and it will be the site of the 3rd and final temple. Muslims believe this is where Muhammad ascended to heaven, and that's the mosque on the left. And the Dome of the Rock is also right there. It's a huge plaza that has both of these churches. So on the right, we have the Dome of the Rock. Christians believe that this is the site where Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. I never knew this before, but Muslims believe this is the site where Abraham went to sacrifice Ishmael, the father of the Muslim faith. Non-Muslims are not allowed inside this shrine, as important as it is to others. It's a beautiful, beautiful building on the outside. The Temple Mount is under Jordanian custodianship, and security is maintained by the Israelis. Jews need special permission to visit and are escorted by police if they want to go up there. And we did see a small group of Jews being escorted by police. The Israeli government enforces a ban on prayer by non-Muslims. So no religious symbols are allowed, no crosses. We had we all had a file folder with all of our prayers that we would say at all the places that we went. We had to stick those file folders in the back of our pants with our shirts pulled down so that they wouldn't be seen, just be allowed to go up there. So, and some of you may have seen in the news that fighting did break out there during Holy Week this year. So, it's heartbreaking. The parents' circle, so integral to a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, is learning about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how it affects the daily lives of Jews, Christians, and Muslims living in the area. It's some things that just stayed with me. In the West Bank, and I think I told you we were in and out of the West Bank, in the West Bank, Palestinians have water collection and storage tanks on their roofs. I didn't get a good picture of this, but they're big black containers that sit on their roofs. So if you are traveling through the West Bank, you see them all over the place. And the reason they have them is because Israel controls the supply of water and only gives them water 2 days a week. So they collect the water so that they have water every day of the week. One place we did not go, we did not venture into Hebron because fighting had broken out there, and so we didn't go. But that is where the tomb of the patriarchs are: Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. One thing that Ghassan, our guide, did point out to us, that in the United States we hear mostly about the death and destruction, and yet he said you need to know there is a lot of goodness here. Jews, Christians, and Muslims do live side by side, loving and caring each other, enjoying each other. So we hear the worst of it, but there is a lot of good going on. And we had a presentation by Rami El-Hanan, an Israeli Jew on the left, and Bassam Elman, a Palestinian Muslim. They go around the world telling their story. A Palestinian suicide bomber killed Rami's daughter when she was 14 years old, and an Israeli border policeman killed Bassam's daughter in front of her school when she was 10 years old. And Rami on the left talked about his hatred for the Palestinians until he found his way to the parents' circle, and he realized that Palestinian parents were grieving loss just as much as Israeli parents were grieving loss. Bassam on the right is unapologetic about being a freedom fighter, fighting for the land that was taken from the Palestinians, yet he is dedicated to peaceful reconciliation. So the Parents Circle is a joint Israeli-Palestinian organization of over 600 families, all of whom have lost an immediate family member to the ongoing conflict. And the members believe the process of reconciliation between nations is a prerequisite to achieving a sustainable peace, and utilizes all the resources they can available in education, public media, and public meetings and the media to spread these ideas. So you can imagine it was really powerful to hear from these two gentlemen. A pilgrimage to the Holy Land draws us closer to our roots and brings new life to our faith. Our faith is never for us alone, as we know, but inspiration for how we live in this world with one another. The Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem covers Israel, the Palestinian territories, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And we did worship at St. George's Cathedral in Jerusalem, which is the home of the diocesan offices. So St. Luke's Hospital, on the left, St. Luke's Hospital on the left is some of these places would let us take pictures of someone. So St. Luke's Hospital is a ministry of the Diocese of Jerusalem. It's founded in 1900. St. Luke's is the only charitable hospital in the West Bank city of Nablus. 40% of the patients are uninsured. And Nablus, a city of 350,000, is home to a large Palestinian refugee camp. So travel restrictions and checkpoints make everyday life difficult for the people of Nablus and surrounding communities, so ready access to comprehensive quality health care at a local hospital is crucial. These are Christians taking care of Muslims, for the most part. Princess Basma School is a ministry also of the diocese on the right there. I saw on their wall of donors, the Diocese of Ohio is listed. This school was founded in the 1960s to care for children with polio. And now they have 450 Palestinian children attending school. Nearly 40% have disabilities. They have a rehab program also. Moms come with their children for 3 weeks to learn how to provide care for their children at home. So again, this is a Christian ministry taking care of Muslims. For the most, some Christians, but some Muslims. And this was a delight. This is an orphanage. St. Vincent Orphanage is also a ministry of the Diocese of Jerusalem. They have about 50 children, newborn through 5 years old. That little boy, you can see the little boy looking through the window, he was so cute. They wouldn't let us into the rooms because of COVID. So we were taking pictures from outside the rooms. But they have rooms for all the different age groups. You can see the third picture over those, that was like a toddler room with little babies in there. So newborn through 5, some of the babies are left at the door. In addition, women who are pregnant out of wedlock, which is illegal, they come and they stay at the orphanage and then have the baby and then leave the baby after they deliver. This is the only orphanage that allows single women to come and have their babies. All religions are welcome. And again, this chokes me up, but adoption is not allowed under Islamic law. So when these children reach 6 years, they are moved to another orphanage where they live until they're 18 and then they're out on their own. So I think it's important, to understand the conflict that's going on over there, the goodness that exists over there, and I do hope that I'll be able to lead a trip maybe in 2 years here from St. Paul's. There is something about being there. As I said, even as much as I believe, there's something about being there that makes it tangible and real. So that's it, and I'd be happy to answer. I think we have a few minutes. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you might have any. Yep.
How come you don't have adoption? Is there a reason?
It's illegal. I don't know the law, but that.
I mean, it was based on something in the Quran, or?
I don't know. I could look, but I don't know why. Leah.
Jeanne, all of the Christian sites you saw, how are they protected and maintained within Israel?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, she's wondering of all the sites we saw, how are they maintained? I don't know a whole lot though, but I know there's conflict on that front, like who maintains which sites. It's once you're there, it's very different than what you imagine. Like the church where the Cana wedding in Galilee, you're driving through a very populated, overbuilt section of the city, and then you walk through a gate and there's the church, right? But I think, I would say, the one place we went that was just a total tourist trap was the Dead Sea. I can't begin to tell you how gaudy and overbuilt it was. But people were down there floating in the Dead Sea. But that was the only place where it felt very touristy. The rest of it feels like it's fairly well maintained. But that does bring me to one more thing. And I think they're different agencies, so I don't really have a good answer to that question.
They interact somewhat positively with Israel, obviously.
Yes, but it even came up while I was there. There was a discussion about some site that was being maintained by some group, and there was some discussion about giving it to some other group to maintain. So I think that's going on a lot. The one other thing I was going to mention, though, that is heartbreaking is when you drive through the West Bank. I don't know that I've ever seen a place that there is garbage everywhere. Everywhere. I don't even know how to explain that to you. It's all over the streets, it's all over the fields, it's everywhere. That's really sad, when you see that and think, oh my gosh, I wish we could, help clean this up, help put something in place to keep it up. But, you know, the life in the West Bank is really difficult.
I'm very interested to know whether the tour that was designed for your group included, and if you talked about it, I didn't hear a focus on the fact of when women came and found the tomb empty.
Repeat the question.
She's wondering if we ever talked about what happened when the women came and they found the tomb empty. No, we didn't really.
No mention of the fact that the first people to discover that Jesus was not in his tomb were women.
So she's asking, was there no mention that the first people to discover that Jesus was not in his tomb were women? Peggy, I honestly can't remember, because for me as a woman, like I know that happened. so if the guy mentioned it, it probably didn't sink in. But I don't recall the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in that.
Yeah.
Because they quickly went to the
They could just brush over that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Oh, sure. Any other? Yes.
Did you get to Bethlehem?
Yes, we were in Bethlehem. That's where the Church of the Nativity is. I'm sorry, that's where the Annunciation is. Yeah.
And then
What did you
And the Nativity, and the Nativity.
What did you think of Bethlehem?
It's crowded and yeah.
The people we know who are gone talk about a giant wall.
Oh yes, I didn't include that. I do have more photos and I just couldn't include everything, but we did the wall that separates. Yes, there's a wall that separates the West Bank, and there's actually wonderful painting murals on this wall to try and, because it's a cement wall and on top is barbed wire, right? So that's not, but there's paintings on this wall, and you might be interested to know one of these great murals is of George Floyd. Yeah, Tim?
What surprised when you think about your studies of the New Testament, the Old Testament, and you think about preparing for this trip and everything, and now you're putting it into perspective, what surprises you most about what you saw and experienced, and what do you think pleased you most about your whole trip?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. What surprised me the most, what pleased me the most about the trip? It might be going back to what I said before, was just that it's so hard to, I can't even find the right words, but that it feels more real once you're there, and I didn't expect that, but I did. I was moved thinking about, these were just ordinary fishermen, right? And this thing that was happening to them was just so amazing. And like, if in our day and time, if you think about that, would we even listen, right? If someone talks about this thing, and so how the power from that, how this we still, right? It's still so much a part of our lives. It's still something that we are transformed by all the time. I had an interesting experience the first Sunday I was back, and I think this will continue. The first Sunday I got back, I went to Trinity to go to church, and the assistant rector was preaching. She did a nice job, but I found I went to a completely different place with the sermon, because it was about the Transfiguration. I'm pretty sure that's what it was about. And of course, once you're there and you experience it, it just changes your life and your perspective. And so I'm really curious to see as we go through the year and I start preaching on these places that I have seen, how that will impact my preaching. Chuck?
You've been speaking of church. I keep hearing you keep saying church. But in all these churches, it's been different religion or
Yes, they are. These churches, it just depends who has control of them right now. Some are Christian, they could be Jewish, they could be Muslim, they could be, Greek Orthodox. different people, it's like, I don't know if you've traveled in Spain, you see that also, that the churches have just changed hands between Christians and Muslims and Jews over the centuries. Yeah, I think, I have to be careful. Yeah, I think we need to wrap up looking at the time. I can't thank you enough for being able to have this experience. I'm really so grateful, and I do hope that we can have a trip go from St. Paul's sometime.